I think labels that impute racism, sexism, or anti-Semitism lead to such fear of guilt that even academic scrutiny is rendered less than important. As intellectuals, it is vital that we as the intellectual community resist this break on academic freedom, and we strive to continue pursuit of freedom for both Palestine and Israel from the basis of activism, but also intellectual activity. We should also challenge with our pens and our voices the temptation to choose a form of government and leaders for Palestinian people. They must choose for themselves. No one should say, after the conflict, there must be a government, but it mustn't include Hamas. The choice of who will govern must be a choice of the Palestinian people. That is what I think that South Africa has an important contribution that it can make, as I do believe that in the end, there will have to be negotiations, and I think all of us need to be ready to play a role in helping to frame a just framework for freedom. We shouldn't leave it to chance. I believe such active participation and interest is necessary beyond protest, and in fact is critical as a signal to the world that we will join together to reject harm and oppression. If all of us fail to act, then we in the international community are saying to the world, freedom and justice are for some and not for all. As the people and government of South Africa, it is not possible for us to hold such a view, given our history, given our troubled transition and context, and given the legacy that President Mandela handed to us when he said that famous foreign policy statement that South Africa cannot be fully free if Palestinians are not free. I believe there is a range of work that all of us should be doing as activists and as academics and intellectuals. As I've said, we should be telling the full story. We should also analyze and probe and address those 7 elements that are the problematique I referred to at the beginning of my contribution. I believe that the members of parliaments all over the world, I'm now retired as a minister. All the members of parliament need to pay close attention to action to reform the United Nations, particularly the United Nations Security Council. That reform doesn't mean those European countries that are not in the Security Council must now be in the Security Council. The debate on reform is not about Europe, it's about including other parts of the world that were colonized in the UN. We also need to address the nature of decision-making of the Security Council and the role of the General Assembly in democratizing decision-making in the United Nations. The Council has 5 permanent members with an undemocratic veto. This was created, as I said, when we were still colonies and when we were administered territories. Never known what that means. Our new age mandates a democratic, inclusive reform to render the United Nations responsible, effective, democratic, and suited to the challenges of a new age. If we had had a reformed United Nations, we would have had a force that could enforce peace in Gaza and in the occupied territories. But because we've only been concerned about peace monitoring, we lack peace enforcement capacity in the United Nations, and it needs to be created as we reform the body. But having said that, and please don't misunderstand me, in South Africa we do not hate the United Nations. The United Nations, in our view, is the premier multilateral body of our world. It must be supported to remain in existence while we undertake reform. Change has to include reform of international development finance institutions to ensure their ability to address the world's conundrum of inequality and poverty. The reasons for saying we do not want the end or destruction of the United Nations is that there will be some other country or body that will want to displace it, and that will want to enforce its unipolarity on us. We want multilateralism. We support multilateralism. We believe nations working together globally must have sovereignty and equality and should be able to be of effect in decision making. That is the reform we want, not the end of the UN. Some, especially young people, are very radical, and they demand all sorts of great radical changes. But change is gradual, change has to be managed, change has to be thought through, and every time you wish to think of change, also consider what the effect of the adjustment you are proposing could be. You don't want to not have a United Nations and having an America saying that they're so powerful that they should be the ones in control. That's the danger. So always be alert. Never be fooled. You get angry with the United Nations and you want to destroy it, you'll be left with real trouble. So do look carefully at matters of institutional reform. I wish to conclude by saying, I believe that individuals can make a difference in society. Individuals united can make a difference in society. In fact, I believe it is individuals who must of necessity work as collectives to make a difference in society. I believe that we need to do much more to develop global solidarity. We need to do much more to convince each other, as we have culturally in South Africa, a concept, a philosophical concept in our communities called Ubuntu. And what it means is I am a person because you recognize my personhood. If you didn't recognize my personhood, I would not be a human being. And so our global solidarity must be about affirming the humanity of others. We've become a selfish world. We think, if we do all the things that Allah asks us to do, that's sufficient. But actually we're created to change the world. And we need to use the attributes we have been granted to make a difference. So I do ask you, please, do not stop. Do not stop protesting. Do not stop writing. Do not stop being on radio. Do not stop being available to be interviewed. Do not stop petitioning. Do not stop pushing your MPs. It's very nice to have nice MPs that you like, but they must perform. They must change things, and they must see that difference. You must see a difference. If you don't, you've got to vote. So I wish to conclude by thanking Friends of Al-Aqsa and many other organizations, both here in the United Kingdom and I think throughout the world, we have seen the emergence of a global solidarity. Let's build on it. Let us ask all the leadership of the different civil society organizations to come together in a global conference where we will do two things. One, we agree on forming global solidarity chapters against apartheid Israel in each of our countries. And number two, all of us support a petition in our millions to the United Nations that they must re-establish that hard-working special committee against apartheid that ensured that the plight of South Africans oppressed by apartheid was not forgotten by the world. Just those two things. Form these chapters which signal and stamp and confirm our global solidarity and joint campaigns. And number two, we ask the UN create that special committee against apartheid with a focus on apartheid Israel. It will be our vehicle to ensure that we cement this fight in the United Nations body and make it a global campaign that will surely ensure that Palestinians are free. Thank you very much for listening.